heard the noise. Are you okay?
No, I'm just.
Huh?
Well, we'll find out. I think they just came on.
Okay.
Can't tell.
If you don't have a line through your microphone anymore, do you?
No, it's just Lori.
And your video's up, so I think you're good.
Oh, we'll see. Yeah, Lori. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. We'll talk later. But pretty much mission accomplished on that. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's close. I think I'm on the screen, so whenever they can, I think so. Take a look. If I'm not, let me know. All right. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, we'll just do the best we can. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Trying over the side over here.
Do you think it'll be okay for me to practice? Yeah. Think it'd be okay for me to leave Parker's sleep and yeah. Or do you think he'll wake up at the house of Rob?
This chair. How do you make it go up?
Oh, yeah, I was figuring out.
Because I look like a... Thank you. I like to command. Just kidding. Yeah. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. If we could get everybody seated and we will begin our afternoon. I want to begin by welcoming Gloria Davis from GR Recruiting. This is welcome, Gloria. They are our search firm for our superintendent search this year. We are, of course, excited and ready for this opportunity to embark on this search for the division's new superintendent. And of course, this is a monumentally important decision, probably the most important decision I think this board will be making during our term. We will be going over the timeline that Ms. Davis is bringing us today. We will be talking about the stakeholder engagement and the process and many other details that I know our community has been reaching out to ask about and interested in how they will be participating in this search for, for the divisions and our communities superintendent. And I will just say that, of course, this board is extremely dedicated to ensuring that we have a very robust stakeholder engagement process, and anyone and everyone who wants to participate and have their voices heard will be part of doing that. I would also like to welcome Mr. Gary Ray, who is with us via Zoom for GR Recruiting. Welcome. And I will go ahead and turn it right over to you, Gloria, to begin. Thank you.
I did. I said this brings back memories sitting at the head of the table with the board. But thank you very much, and we are so happy to be working with Fairfax County on your superintendent search. And our goal, as well as yours, we know, is to find you the next best great leader, and we are definitely going to do that. I would like to introduce the president of the firm of GR Recruiting, Gary Ray. Gary, you want to introduce yourself to the group? Oh, is he there? He's muted.
I don't know if you can hear us.
Can you hear us? All my wonderful tech team guys, I'm sure they are.
I can hear you.
Oh, excellent.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Gary, I was just saying, saying who I am, and I'll come back and introduce myself more fully in a minute, but as the president of the firm, I wanted you to start and introduce yourself. Again, this is Gary Ray, the president of GR Recruiting.
Good afternoon. We're happy to be here on behalf of GR Recruiting and looking forward to assisting the Fairfax County Public Schools and its search. Gloria will be the lead associate there. She's on the ground, and I certainly will be there later on with some other stakeholder groups down the road. So it's a pleasure to be here, and we'll certainly try to give you an overview of the entire search process and answer any questions that may arise. So thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And as Gary said, I am the lead associate, so you are going to have me for the rest of this week and in the days and months to come, as well as Gary and our other associates. One of the things that GR Recruiting prides itself on, we have multiple associates across the nation, and we will have many of them working with us here as we go through the wonderful process of talking to your constituents in terms of your staff and in your staff community, as well as your parent and public community. I myself am a retired superintendent, yay for retirement, and superintendent of 16 years. And I have worked with urban and inner city districts across the country, and so I am happy to be here as an educator, as a former teacher, principal, and central office administrator. So with that, we're going to dive right into the presentation. Next slide, please, and thank you to my wonderful now teammates, Bev and Laura over there. They're going to help me go through the presentation in terms of the PowerPoint. What you should see on the screen is, just want to check and make sure, the first half of the timeline. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go through some of the dates in general and then take a deeper dive into the various dates and give more explanation of what we're going to be doing during the entire process. But this timeline will also be a part of what will be displayed on the district's website for everyone to have access to and become familiar with. We have started, as you see, on November the 15th, 11:15, with a planning meeting with the board, and then we began preparing promotional materials after which on the 17th. And basically, as a part of GR Recruiting, as I said, we are a national firm, and we have already began to notify associates and other professional contacts that we have across the country that this search is in existence, and with the Fairfax County Superintendent Board of Education is looking for a new superintendent. And we're going to start the individual board interviews starting this week. We wanted to wait until, even though it says would start on the 7th, we wanted to wait until after this public meeting on the 13th, and we'll begin contacting all of you on the board to set up individual interviews either before the holidays or after, based on your schedule and what would work best for you. Then following that, you see indicated on December the 8th, we have already begun to notify all staff stakeholders that we will have a series of meetings starting tomorrow, the 14th through the 16th. I will be meeting individually with members of the leadership team and such, and I'll get into that in a little more detail. But just to let everyone know, the 14th through the 16th of this week, we will have stakeholder interviews with the staff. And not only will I be holding individual interviews, but members of our team will do the same. And the 13th, then we will have, as we did this morning, we had a closed session with the board, and now we're into the public session. And then we will, starting tomorrow, post online the survey link, and then we will continue with the staff interviews, as I said, the meetings, and then move into January the 10th through the 12th. And again, as I said, I'll talk more about all of this in a minute, but I just want you to know what's here. 10th through the 12th will be the parent and community stakeholders, 10th and 12th of through the 12th of January, 2022. And then starting on the, ending rather on the 13th, will be the ending for the survey. So we have starting tomorrow from the 14th all the way through January 13, 2022 for the survey that will be out there that I'll give more detail about in just a minute. Then on the 20th, we will have another closed session with the board following the survey and the stakeholder meetings, and that closed session as well as the public session will be to give the results of all of the stakeholder meetings that have been held, staff, parent, and community, as well as survey results. And that will take place again on the 20th for the public from 1 to 3, and with the board also having some conversation in the morning from 10 to 12. Our applications will start immediately after we develop the profile, which will, as soon as we complete all of the stakeholder meetings and give a summary on the 20th, and the board decides on what that profile will be based on all of the feedback and information they have gleaned from the community, from parents, from the staff. Then we will then begin the advertisement on starting the 21st of January, going all the way through till the 4th of March. March 4, 2022 is the deadline, and that's on the next slide, Bev and Laura, is the deadline for all the application materials. And we will have ongoing screening after that through the 16th of March. And do know, as applications come in, we continue to review, we continue to discuss, and we continue to really screen who is applying. Again, making sure that they meet the criteria that has been set. And then we will have interviews starting in closed session. The board and the search firm will meet on the 17th of March, where we bring a slate, and then the 21st and 22nd, you see the first round of interviews, and then the 28th through the 29th is the finalist round of interviews, with the goal of having a decision made by the end of March, around March 29, and the board then making some type of announcement the first part of April 2022. That's quickly going through the timeline again that I said is will be available, if not already, on the district's website for everyone to see. Now I'd like to go into the process in more detail so that we clearly understand, and then as we go through, making sure that if there are any questions, that we can then dialogue about those questions. So next slide, please, Bev and Laura. This next slide gives you an idea of the entire process in one fell swoop in terms of a diagram. This whole process is about the input from not only the board. It starts with conversation with the Board of Education, but it totally includes the entire community, entire staff, because after all, everyone involved in the district makes up the process of who the next district leader should be. So I want to clearly understand that, but we start with the input from the Board of Education. We then develop a profile based on all of that input, based on all of that information. We continually recruit from a candidate pool, understanding that it's not only about who applies, but it's about recruiting people. I just said to the board, every superintendent's job I've had, I was recruited. A couple of times I asked, you want me to go where? But the point is, sitting in a job, people call you, contact you, and ask you, would you like to apply? So we recruit, we review application. The next part of that is the board selects candidates. We collaborate and finalize the search again with the input of the board. And we always are looking at those strategic supports that superintendents need after they get the job. One creative thing about GR recruiting is we don't stop with the hire. We then continue to work with the board and the superintendent once they are in place to make sure they're successful. Because after all, that's what you want. You want the superintendent to be successful, and whether they're a seasoned superintendent, first-time superintendent, doesn't matter. We all need support, and that's one of the things that GR recruiting does. Next slide, please. So step one in the process of the board's involvement. I talked about the planning meeting that was held on November the 15th. This is where we began to talk about the timeline. We began to look at all aspects of the search. GR recruiting heard from the board about all of the board goals and values that have been set in place for Fairfax County, because that's extremely important. We want to make sure that the person that we're recruiting, talking to, and looking at is someone that meets the standards, goals, and values set by the Fairfax County Board of Education and the Fairfax County community. And so we began to have that discussion, and we're guided by those core values and strategic priorities. We talked about a timeline, and we also talked about all aspects of marketing and recruiting. For example, we discussed looking at all types of candidates. We were looking for the K-12 educator. We're looking for a non-traditional candidate if that person deems to have the type of background and experience that meets those core values and strategic priorities. And so as we market and recruit, we're keeping all of those things in mind, because that's critically important. It's critically important to understand that everyone that sometimes applies won't meet the standards that are set and won't meet those priorities. So that's where having a national firm comes in to help with that screening process and to look at their experience and background and make sure that they meet the standards that have already been set. We will also, as I said, have individual interviews with each board member around the table, and that individual interview will consist of the same thing that we'll be doing when we meet with stakeholders this week as well as in January, asking questions that are already set around what do you believe are the characteristics and the personality traits that you would like to see in the next superintendent? What is it that you value about Fairfax County School District? What do you think is important? What do you want to see happen moving forward in terms of priorities around student achievement, parent engagement, community engagement, infrastructure projects, the whole gamut? What do you feel is important? What have the successes been thus far? And what are the challenges that you see that will be in place moving forward? Those are the kind of questions that we will ask of everyone. We want to get everyone's input and opinion, and trust me, they will be varied. But one of the things we say is we want open and honest conversation, because all of that feeds into developing that profile that I mentioned earlier. So those individual interviews will start to be held with each board member, and that can either be Zoom or only time it really can't be in person because we're out of town, but we will set that schedule up with each individual based on their schedule as well as ours. So that's a part of step one. Any questions around what I have said thus far?
Ms. Davis, I think we're going to go ahead and go through the presentation, if that's okay with you.
That is
And I'm
fine.
keeping a list, and we can come back at the end. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Next slide, please, with step two on the staff stakeholder meetings. Again, the purpose is there, desired traits, personality traits, and characteristics that you would like to see, and those meetings will be held starting tomorrow. I will be here to meet with each member of the leadership team individually. Those appointments have already been set, and I understand many have RSVP'd, but I will be meeting individually with them to ask them the type of questions that I just mentioned a minute ago. Again, getting their thoughts, opinions, honest answers to very particular questions. So 17 of those individual leadership team interviews have already been set up. All of the directors and executive principals have also been invited to meet as a group, and those dates and times have already been established. I will also be meeting with all the teacher and support staff leaders, the leaders of all of the teacher organizations and associations, as well as the support staff associations and leaderships. I will be interviewing them this week, as well as all of the principals and assistant principals in all 5 regions. Every last principal and assistant principal has been invited to a meeting in each of the 5 regions. And those groups have been set up. We try to do it in a little more detail than what you had before in your last superintendent process. Rather than, say, meeting with all the principals in a cafeteria, we have divided the groups up so the groups are smaller, so that they are more intimate, so we can get more dialogue and conversation. So as you see indicated, we set them up in 15 to 20 attendees. Sometimes it's a little over, depending on the size in each region. But my point is, we should have at least 2 principal groups, elementary principal groups, 2 middle and high school principal groups, 2 assistant elementary groups, and 2 assistant middle and high principal groups in every region. So that gives us the input from all of those who will attend and be on Zoom. Those meetings will be on Zoom to give their feedback and their input into the process. Next slide, please. In terms of the parent and community stakeholder meetings, as I said, those will be held on January 10 through 12, 2022. Some of those will be in person. I'll probably be the one back here on the ground during that time frame, and the majority of those will be on Zoom as well. We will have, right now, we have about 100+ groups that we are scheduling and really looking at making sure groups are from each of the 5 regions again. And one of the things that we're paying pretty much attention to is making sure the groups also are all of those that are established in terms of parents and community leaders, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but making sure that groups that maybe you don't normally hear from, and I know in Fairfax County you pretty much hear from everybody, but, but there might be a group or two that doesn't always show up or is not always physically involved. My point is we want to make sure you hear from the voice of the voiceless. We want to make sure you hear from people that you maybe have not always heard from, who have an opinion, who are also very important, but we want to make sure that the reach out is broad, extremely broad. So that's my point I want to make. Then the next point is we will have town hall meetings in each of the 5 regions. Even though we will be inviting particular groups of people, particular parent groups, we will still also have a town hall meeting that is open to any and everybody. So that way, every single person can have an opportunity to participate if they so choose and if it fits their schedule. And when I say at various times, that means maybe one early in the morning. Sometimes people can meet on their way to work, 7 o'clock, excuse me, 7:30. During the day, lunchtime, some people can come during their lunch hour, depending on the type of job they have or depending on their schedule, and then some in the evening. So my point is to make the schedule varied enough to accommodate everyone. And I will also say, even though the town hall meeting will be in each region, if you're in Region 2 and you want to come to Region 1's meeting, that is perfectly fine. You will see everyone will see the entire schedule, so that way they can come again at the time that best meets their needs. So I wanted to put that caveat out there. And we're going to try very hard to have all those invitations and schedules sent out on Thursday, December the 16th. Don't fall out of your chair, Bev, and Laura, because they have been terrific in helping. That means over 250 groups and individuals will be represented in terms of invitations sent to either individuals or small or large groups, and including the town hall meetings. Again, a much broader net than before, wanting to make sure that we meet the needs of the entire Fairfax County community. Next slide, please. As we talk about and I think I have 2 of the same. Step 3 in the parent community stakeholder meetings, wanting to just give you an idea of some of the groups that we will be talking to. Student groups, you have many student groups, so we're going to definitely make sure we represent those. Minority groups, we're going to make sure that in all aspects of the community that we are talking to all the groups indicated as minority groups, as well as civic groups, religious organizations, business leadership, higher education, general community-based groups, parent leadership, community advocacy groups, and all other groups in addition to this. This just gives an idea of the categories, if you will, and there are many groups under each one of these categories, but again, wanting the public to see that we're trying to leave no stone unturned in terms of who we invite, who we include, who we ask to participate. Next slide, please. As we continue then to talk about the stakeholder groups that, and again, some of those meetings, as I said, will be in person as well as virtual and on the screen. We want to then make sure that everyone understands that the online survey that is going to be online on the district's website starting tomorrow, December 14, is a survey that asks everyone in the Fairfax County community to give their input. We are partnering with K-12 Insight, which is a company that has had a lot of experience in survey development, and they have partnered with GR Recruiting to develop the survey, as well as they will then be the company responsible for compiling the results and sharing information with the board and the public after we have completed the survey, as well as the stakeholder meetings. It not only contains questions related around 28 value traits of great leaders with instructions to select the top 8. And you might ask, well, Gloria, why do they have 28 traits there and ask you to only select the top 8? Because we want people to think about what is it they truly value. Yes, you value all 28, but if you had to, when you look at a person and you want to know those top skills that they have and those top traits that they possess, what is your thought around narrowing that down to the top 8? And because it takes a minute to think about that, and we want people to think about their answers. So that's how we have set it up. There will also be 15 open-ended questions where people will write down their thoughts and ideas. And the last question in that open-ended question is just tell us anything that we forgot that you want to share. Trust me, people respond to that. And all of those results will be shared in terms of the responses, the open-ended questions with the Board of Education. And as I said, we'll give a summary when we have the meeting on January 20. The survey will be offered in the languages you see indicated, naturally English and naturally Spanish and Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Russian. And those languages will be able to be accessed by all of the constituents when they click on the superintendent search, shall we say, box on the website, and then they click on the survey. As I mentioned, the survey is research-based, and the survey and all focus groups will be tallied together in terms of a summary. And based on all of this information, the board will then, in discussion, develop personality traits, profile traits, that then that profile is used to share in the advertisement. The point being that after we have gathered all of this feedback and input, we want to then utilize that to develop the profile that we will utilize in looking for the best candidate that fits that profile to be the next superintendent. And that's a key component of the survey. Gary, I'm going to stop there and see if there's anything you want to add that I have mentioned thus far.
No, I think you are covering things. Our key objective is to reach out to as many stakeholder groups as possible so that we can get their input. And this is an extremely important part of the process, is identifying the characteristics and the traits, and as well as people answering those 15 open-ended questions, because it gives us an opportunity to get a good grasp as we go out and recruit candidates, and we're able to answer questions from candidates based upon the various staff meetings we've had, various community meetings. So there's a comfort level when we're recruiting so that we can identify the best fit for candidates, because somebody can be an outstanding candidate in a certain part of the country, but are they going to fit the profile for Fairfax County Public Schools and be able to meet the expectations of the community as well as the board? So this whole profile building is extremely important for us, and it's an ongoing thing, not only for us to, once we come up with the profile, but it also helps us to assist in developing interview questions for the firm, GR Recruiting, to develop interview questions as we move along with candidates so that we can customize and tailor those interview questions as we recruit and screen candidates. And we also will use that same information that goes beyond just the profile piece at the end, that we will develop interview questions with the board based upon a lot of the discussions and information gathering that we do throughout the search process. So it's not just a matter of us getting a profile and the information is gone. It's information we use throughout the process of developing our firm questions as we work with candidates, as well as developing interview questions for the video, as well as the interview questions for the board. So this is a very important process.
Okay, thank you, Gary. As we look at the next slide that addresses recruitment, we want to, again, emphasize wholeheartedly that we are going to and have been aggressively recruiting top candidates for the position. And that word personally is very important. One of the things that GR Recruiting prides itself on is we have a lot of contacts across the country. In essence, we know people. And we have been talking to individuals, again, that just based on our initial conversation and our initial involvement, that we feel would be very good candidates to apply. But as we move forward with getting more feedback from the stakeholder meetings and from the surveys, we will continue to aggressively recruit. And that person-to-person conversation is extremely important because people value, I know myself and Gary and the other associates, they value who we are. And if I say to someone, you know, I really think you would be a good candidate for Fairfax County, they believe me. They know I wouldn't even ask them if I didn't think that that was true. So my point is reputation matters and reputation is important. And that's how you can pick up the phone and call their personal cell phone and ask them about the job. So I want you to know, and I want the public to know, that that's a critical part of what we do and will be doing. We will reach out to diverse candidates from all backgrounds, but especially those who have the experience and expertise of working in large school districts with diverse populations and diverse communities. They have to understand that. They have to understand how to amass achievement in a high-performing district and how to make sure that the achievement gap gets lessened, and how to make sure that as they want to be the next leader, that they're able to work with various communities of different backgrounds and different concerns, and be able to do it in such a way that everybody feels whole, everybody feels that they're important, and everybody knows that they have been listened to. As I have reviewed a lot of your board meetings and just watch what's going on, you need a good listener. And you need someone that is able to understand the concerns and address them in such a way to make everyone feel that they have been heard and that their issues have been addressed, but do it in a way that you can also make tough decisions and make valid decisions. So that highly qualified, diverse pool of candidates is something that we will continually make sure that we're looking at and bring back to the board for their consideration. We have a professional website that we will utilize, and we have numerous associates all over the country that are also looking to help recruit and help bring names forward of interested individuals. And we will also advertise through other professional websites and professional organizations such as AASA, the American Association of School Administrators, NAPSE, the National Alliance of Black School Educators, ALAS, the Latino Association of School Superintendents, the Virginia Association of Administrators, local, state, and national. So we are going to make sure that the advertisement is across the board, as well as using social media to also do the same thing in terms of LinkedIn and various other Facebook and Twitter that we also have, all the social media platforms. So we will make sure that the advertisement is broad and is thorough. Next slide, please. As we then get to the point of selecting candidates, our screening process is very in-depth. We first, as I said, we do pre-screening of candidates to to determine if they just meet the prerequisite traits and qualities and experience, as I've talked about this afternoon. And then once we pre-screen, we will then bring a slate of candidates to the board for that meeting on March 17, I believe it is. And at that meeting, we will then make sure that that slate of candidates is, and it's usually anywhere from about 8 to 12 candidates, and the board will look at those 8 to 12 candidates and review all of their paperwork, all of their information, including resume, application, letters of reference, any other additional materials they wanted to share. The Board of Education will have had time to review all of that. Plus, we will have videos on each one of those individuals. And those videos will consist of 3 questions that they have to answer. We will work with the board on those 3 questions, but the questions usually center around, first and foremost, what have you done to amass student achievement? Not what you talk about you're going to do, but what we're looking for is people who have had success in improving student achievement, and we want them to talk about that. So it's not, I wish I could or I might have, it's no, what have you actually produced? And in the realm of student achievement. So one question around that. Another question around parent, staff, and community engagement. How have you done that in your current position? How have you done that in your previous positions? We don't just look at the job they're doing now. We look at the job that they have done over the course of their career, because it means a lot that as you look at where they are now and look at how they have amassed their career, all of that is important. So how have they engaged parents and community? And again, with board input, we will make sure that we have them to talk about on the video how they have done that. And then the last question is around just giving a general overview of their career and experience that makes them the best candidate, they believe, for Fairfax County. So it's allowing them to talk about their background, talk about the job that they have done over the course of their career. And as I said, we will craft the questions with input from the board, but that's generally the type of questions that we want to make sure they get answered. And those videos, along with all of their paperwork, will be shared with the board at that meeting on the 17th of March. And after that, and this is just all internal in terms of a closed session, because from all of that information, the board will then select the candidates they wish to have for that first round of interviews. So that's a pretty lengthy session, but it's a very important session, because once the board then decides who they want to interview during that first round of interviews on March 21st through 22nd, it will be based on that slate that we brought to them, to you on the 17th of March. And as we bring that slate, we want to make sure, as you see in the second bullet, that you understand that an extensive background search has been done, not only looking at all the social media sources and platforms, but a verification of all their credentials, references, work experience, education experience. Yes, we check if they say they have all 3 degrees, we want to make sure they've had all 3 degrees. So my point is, we talk to the university. We not only just take what they have at face value. As we talk about the references that they will bring, we not only talk to the people that they list on the job application, because let's face it, no one's going to put on the application anyone that's not going to speak well of them. So we have the experience and background to call and talk to people that they don't put on their application. The reference checks is very thorough. Because of that, we know who to call. We call the union leader association in the district they're in, because usually you won't find that on the application. We talk to individuals in the civic realm in terms of a mayor or the city council. We will call, a lot of times, real estate agents in the city where they are. My point to you is we reach out to others that they have not mentioned in the town or the city that they live in now, just in terms of that extensive background check that we mentioned. And next slide, please. And as we talk about bringing that slate of candidates and talk about the video interviews, and then as we then go into the final selection of those interviews and that background, the point we want to make with this slide is we want to make sure there are no surprises for the board, there are no surprises for the community. So extensive background checks, extensive reference checks, and extensive look at where they are in their career at this time, plus career means current and previous positions. Okay, Gary, anything you want to add there before we go on to the final portions?
No, I think you've got it. You're ready on the first and second round, and if there is a second round, but we're going to be pretty aggressive as we recruit and screen candidates, and that's important for everyone to understand.
Okay, and then as we not only look at the board in selecting that slate and bringing the first round of interviews, we want to let everyone know that, because you might ask, well, how's the board going to do that? Well, one of the things that we recommend, and there's a lot of flexibility here, but we have an objective scoring instrument that we will bring to the board for review and for the board to look at, to utilize during the interview process as well as the screening process, trying to have some objectivity to how the process gets concluded. Naturally, there will be lots of conversation and discussion, but the point I want to make here is that there is a plan and a way to objectively try to finalize what each board member feels are the most important points of each candidate in making that final decision. Because after all, it's one of the biggest jobs and the most important job that a Board of Education has is selecting their leader. And we want to make sure there's objective process to that. And as we look at both rounds, not only that first round of interviews on March 21st and 22nd, and as I said, when the board will interview from that slate, usually anywhere from 5 to 8 individuals, depending on what they feel is best. Then we will, from there, select the finalists, the final interview individuals, and those interviews again would be held on March 28 and 29. But as you deliberate and reach consensus and look at all of the various components of the interview process, that 28th, 29th, and 21st and 22nd will have a real important part to coming to the final decision, and that is selecting the final candidate. How that will be done, the board will still continue to have that conversation about how they want to hold those final interviews. Usually 2 individuals, very rarely is it 3, but those finalists on the 28th and 29th of March. But after the individual is selected, and as we go to the next slide, and which is the final slide, when the board makes a decision on the 28th and 29th, then the new superintendent is then selected, and the board will then decide how they want to make that announcement. As I said at the very beginning of the presentation, sometime probably around the first part of April 2022.
Yeah, Gloria, I might add is that on the first and second round of the interview process, as the board goes, again, I want to reiterate, it goes back to the profile, the information gathering from the various stakeholder groups as we develop those interview questions. So it's a method of being able to continue to engage the community and staff as we develop those interview questions as the board designs those interview questions for the first and second round. So everyone is still part of the process as we move to conclusion of hiring the next superintendent.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And with that, I will engage questions that you have thought about or jotted down along the way.
Excellent. Thank you for that presentation. We did get some communication about our slides being ADA compliant. We will be working on that and posting them for those watching. We apologize for that inconvenience. And with that, Ms. Karen Corbett?
Thank you, Chair Pekarsky. That was one of the first things I was going to mention was the ADA accessibility. And I want to ensure that when we are doing our surveys, that they are also ADA accessible. As
Somebody was asking.
Am I?
Oh, okay.
And so we want to, just to ensure that as we proceed, that we have everything that is ADA accessible, including our surveys, including if we are having Zoom meetings, that we have somebody who is available to provide sign language and able to ensure that everybody who wants to be engaged is able to fully participate in this process. Similarly, I noted that you did not have any of the Arabic languages listed for our survey, and I would urge that we have those languages included as well. You noted in your presentation that there were some promotional materials that you were already working on. If you could share those with us, I think that would be very helpful. And I just want to assure the community, there's another piece, which is in the past, we've always had a community panel as part of our interview process. And I would urge that we add that community panel into the interviews process. What they have typically done is they have met with individuals prior to the board actually meeting with them or concurrently with the boards, but the board meets separately. So if we can build that in, I think it's critical. And then I would appreciate working with you as a board to determine who we would want on that community panel. Additionally, if we can just assure the public that we are committed to a very transparent process that ensures full and robust community engagement, not only those that have traditionally been engaged, but some of our new organizations and those that have been have not been as engaged in the past. And I know we're looking at all of our advisory committees to be part of that, and I welcome that. The last thing is, and I was glad you captured it, which is that this school system, the most important role of this board is the hiring of a superintendent and retaining a superintendent that ensures that we have every child by name and need, and that we do not leave children out of the success story of Fairfax County Public Schools.
For sure. And as far as, thank you for that, Karen. And as far as the interview panel, clearly that's a decision for the board, and we'll be happy to accommodate in whatever way you feel is appropriate.
Well, then I will urge my colleagues to go ahead and make that adjustment to make sure that we do have it. And if you could add to your slides the expected hiring date, so that, or that the expected start date, so that everybody knows that our objective is to have a smooth transition between Dr. Brabrand's leadership role and our new superintendent.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. And the start date is July 1. I want to mention that, 2022. And one of the things, too, I wanted to mention is I know people might feel, well, this is a very robust timeline and a very, we're moving very quickly. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because of the current climate that exists across the country in terms of the political climate with COVID and all of the critical issues around the pandemic that superintendents and district leaders have had to address over time. The climate is just different now. And so we know that as we look at that and look at other school districts across the country, as well as those up and down the East Coast, that other districts are looking, especially like size districts, are looking for district leaders, district superintendents. And so we want to make sure that Fairfax County is in front of all of those other districts in terms of their selection and their search process. So I wanted to also mention that. But thank you for those questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Corbett Sanders. Next up, Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you. I'm going to go more procedurally. I've got 3 areas of concern that you've presented to the board. First of all, I very much agree with you about wanting to have an aggressive timeline so that we can compete at a national level with other schools districts that are searching for superintendents in that same window. However, when I look at the dates and the timeline you've laid out, you've got 1 business day between when the board is going to meet with you to get the slate of candidates on a Thursday, and then turn around and on a Monday, Tuesday, we would be having candidates come meet with us.
Yes.
So I mean, I have concerns about that kind of tight timeline. And then the second thing is then you go to the second round of interviews where I think there would be like a four-day turnaround. So I would suggest to my colleagues that we may want to look at shifting it just ever so slightly, because we have a real lag time of when the board will meet with stakeholder input on January 20th. By the way, Dr. Gloria, you said then you'd post it on the 21st. I don't know how that happens when the board will have just seen the information you're giving us. So if we really are able to take input that I hope will be from tens of thousands of people, then we're gonna have that issue there. Running quickly through my things, so I think we might have to shift it and say something like application opens January 24th and we close on February 21st. That would give us another 10 days to move up the timeline, because when we're talking about the most important thing this board does, it's actually interviewing the candidates. And that leads to my second question. Either you or Gary, please answer, why is it that you guys are saying optional for a second round of interviews, when in the history that I know of Fairfax County, we always have 2 rounds of interviews for our superintendent search?
Okay, I can answer a couple of let me answer a couple of the questions. I'll try to answer your questions first, is because there are a lot of districts are looking for various candidates. And when we bring into you on the 17th, where we meet with the board, let's say we bring in those, I don't know, 8, 9, or whatever those top candidates might be. We've already told those candidates, if you are selected, to be ready to interview, on the 21st and 22nd. We've already prepared them so that they're ready, because if we don't want to stretch it out, and so they are ready to interview that first round. So they know what the timeline, and it's important for us to put that timeline to turn it around quickly so that we're not having a gap of a week or 2 and lose people. So when we take the candidates in, the candidates know, the board knows that we're ready to move. The reason why we have a second round option is because sometimes, even though the history, and that's the reason why we put the word optional, is because once in a while there could be a runaway candidate. And and the board's excited about that candidate, but that candidate may be being wooed, so to speak, by another district. And so we want the option of Fairfax County Public Schools to have that option if they need to move. And I understand that maybe your history's been that way, but we're in a different kind of a market now.
Of the application. So that's about 6 weeks when people are able to apply and fill in and submit their information. The dates of the first interview and the second round of interview, I can tell you from 46 years in education, people will respond to those dates. The short turnaround, they want a short turnaround. The type of top quality people that we are talking to, I'm going to be honest, a lot of them will have applied and are being interviewed by other districts. So you can't wait too long in between your first round and your second round to invite them back, because if you do, they get picked up by somebody else. So as Gary just said, they will know these dates. They know it's no problem. It's just a matter, if they need to, they jump on an airplane and they come back. But they would rather this than stretched out. And that's just the superintendent search experience and the business that we're in. It will work. Trust me, it will work.
Well, in my final 37 seconds, what I would ask is if you can please provide the board with the draft survey. We've had issues in the past where surveys went out to the public. It wasn't run by the board. We didn't see the questions. So you mentioned posting it tomorrow. I have a huge problem, Chair Pekarski, that any survey on the superintendent would go out and the board never saw it. So
We did send it last week, but.
it wasn't presented to us today in front of the public, and it wasn't presented in closed. So we need it presented. We need to have it posted. And then in terms of this, I will just say to my colleagues, I absolutely think that, yes, we want to be competitive, but we're talking about a long-term relationship for this school system. So I absolutely think we will want a second round to fully vet from the first round of candidates to the second round, and that's my advocacy.
And again, and we totally hear that. The option is your option. It's totally your call.
Great, thank you. Next up, Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Thank you, and I'm happy to follow my colleague. I do understand the concern about making sure we have an opportunity. I think if I'm understanding Ms. McLaughlin's comments, her concern seems to be just to make sure the board has an opportunity to really give input and thoroughly review. And so it sounds as though this is an ongoing process. Mm-hmm. Certainly you've done it, and you've done it more so in this particular climate, which I do think is different perhaps than some previous years. So I know that we will have ongoing communication to make sure that those things are happening, and I certainly support the board having a full opportunity to review, to talk about what we're doing, and also have an opportunity to look at that survey. I did want to talk a little bit about, what questions you might be receiving, which I don't want you to necessarily tell me right now. But I do think I'm wondering if in the documents presented to our applicants who may have questions about what we're dealing with or how this decision was made, our previous chair shared with us the letter that was was a statement of what we said publicly during the meeting. And I'm wondering if that might be helpful to you as you're dealing with applicants who kind of want to know how we got where we are. So, if my colleagues want to weigh in on that being available, it is a public statement that I'm referring to. And then that way, it is what has already been out there, and that can be reinforced if that is at all helpful. Okay. With respect to the community selection panel, I too read those emails. We are getting a few. I certainly support utilizing a community selection panel as we have done in the past. It is one of the ways that we do get community input. With respect to languages, because I work across this region, I know I've had to use a number of interpreters. And so I'd like to ask Orsi what languages per our population are most needed so that, I see a head shaking. Oh, okay. Just to make sure that we're covering the languages that are most relevant in Fairfax County. The target dates, again, I'm seeing those as target dates, meaning that if there is a need to change a date, or, hey, we didn't get this done, or we need more input, I think that's a matter of communication between this company, your company, and us. And so I trust that that will be done. And just, as a public comment, I know a few months ago, we had somebody testify that they wanted to participate in PEC so that they could be a part of the superintendent search. And so hopefully this clarifies any confusion, as that committee has nothing to do with the process. So I'm hoping that we are communicating clearly. People know how to text us and email us. Oh, I'm done. So at any rate, yeah, I just want the community to understand. So thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
Ms.
thank you.
Davis, I'll let you respond, then I'll ask Carolyn to respond to your question about the languages.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Davis?
Yes. And we do have the languages, I know in, I think it's Euro, and I probably won't pronounce this correctly, Farsi. I know, and that should have made it on the slide, because I know the staff in the communication department has done that. So I
Okay.
do know we have those two. And as I said, apologize for those not being on the screen, but
If we
yes.
could just get
Yeah.
input from them to make sure we're covering folks that we try to do in
Excuse me.
general.
I'll ask
so-
Ms. Lloyd to respond.
So just,
Oh, okay.
And
yeah,
after Ms.
thank
Davis
you.
is
So
done.
just to
Thanks.
confirm, we've been working with GR Recruitment to make sure that the languages are correct, and they are the languages that we work with our communities on, and those are, as well as English, obviously, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Farsi, Urdu, Arabic, and Vietnamese. And the survey has been translated into all of those, not via machine translate, by professional translation by our translation team, to make sure that we're using it in the right dialect and the right way that we would normally translate for our communities.
Just a quick follow-up to that. In my work, I've had to use Amharic interpreters quite a bit, and have we looked at the need for that?
We did. We have looked at that. We know we have a need for it. We do not have an Amharic interpreter on staff. So
I
we
do.
have worked, yes, right, absolutely. We're well aware of it, and we are working potentially with the team to see if we can get that sent to an external company, but there is, obviously there are some question marks around that and the timeline as well.
Thank you.
Can we go back, Ms. Keys-Kamara, or
I think she addressed, unless she wanted, did you?
Ms. Davis, do you have anything else to add to Ms. Keys-Kamara's statements?
In terms of the information and the letter that you mentioned, I mean, as soon as it would help to have us have a copy of that, so we'll be happy to have that as we get questions moving forward from potential superintendent candidates.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Dr. Anderson?
Thank you. Just kind of picking up on this, because it was also one of my questions. I'd like to get a sense of, when you have the Zoom calls with the community or the community groups, how do you anticipate for the translation to take place? And I know I'm being very specific in the weeds here, because I want to be sure that folks who need that translation are not having to read it, that it is a simultaneous translation, so they could really have full participation. So who can speak to that?
Well, I know we will be working with Helen and her department on having, I guess I would say, the normal translators that you utilize, or the normal individuals that you have working with you when you have community groups, would be my immediate answer, but we need to probably talk further about that.
Yes, we will have, we'll have simultaneous translation, interpretation in the languages that for which people sign up for. We always ask for a sign up, so we make sure we're not pulling in interpreters who are not needed for that evening or that session. But we will make sure that for everyone that requests it, there is coverage and they are supported simultaneously. And also so they can ask questions, and those questions can then be answered simultaneously as well. So it's a full service.
That will be important, so I would love to get those details when you have an opportunity, Ms. Lloyd. And I also have to echo that the languages that have been stated here on slide 10 are insufficient for my community, because we do need Urdu, and we need Farsi, we need Arabic, so we need to be sure that those communities are represented. Just kind of going to slide 9 a little bit, you have a huge list of individuals who are going to be part of the input. And we all know that the profile, it's an important development, because it really speaks to who we're going to attract.
Exactly.
And so I'm taking this part very seriously. I also know that there's a lot of input from all of these individuals, but how are we prioritizing what I consider, and could be me, our priority groups, our employees, our parents, our students?
Okay.
Because a lot of these folks don't necessarily fall into those categories, and I'm really concerned about an overrepresentation of voices that are not our key demographics.
I would say I'm right now utilizing the list of groups and individuals that was provided to me based on our first meeting with the board. And I know both Stella and Rajana are going to, we talked about having an additional meeting while I'm here on the ground to take a look at that list. But the priority of which groups to include and how to just develop that, I would need and seek input from the board because, again, I would not know that. I'm just taking the list that was provided to me and beginning to develop a schedule. But I know that we'll have additional input. They both have offered to assist with that. And
I think it's really important for us to prioritize that feedback. Nothing against the business leadership, but my eyes just fell on that group. I don't want for their themes and their voices to be the highly represented voice. It has to be our parents, our students, and our staff. So whatever it is, whatever formula has to be enacted for us to make sure that those rise to the top, we have to do something. Otherwise, those voices will be lost, and that will be a huge problem.
okay.
You also talked earlier about the support that is provided to superintendents, whether they are new or experienced. Can you give a little bit more in terms of what that entails?
Very, very much so. One of the things we know is when a superintendent starts a job, there are lots of moving parts, shall we say. And so one of the things we can help a new superintendent do based on our experience in working with Fairfax County is give them an idea of where to start along with input from the board of which groups to reach out to. I call them, in my own experience, kitchen cabinet groups. There are groups that, as you just mentioned, that the board feels are a priority and knows are the priority, and as we continue to work with the community, we'll also know that. So we would be able to just give them direction on where to begin with engaging with people, meeting with parents, meeting with students, meeting with community leaders, and so on. Also, one of the unique things about GR Recruiting is we have a whole equity program, and so we can also help them, and we provided that in our proposal, but we have modules on all pieces of equity as it relates to parents, as it relates to students, as it relates to a superintendent as an equity leader, as it relates to equity around students with disabilities, and we can talk more about that with the board, but we can help in that area. We can also provide coaching and mentoring of just having someone that they can call. I can tell you as a former superintendent, it helps to be able to have someone that you can call and say, this just happened, and be able to talk it through. So we can provide that support as well. So I'm saying that we can provide support in helping them engage all aspects of the community and staff. We can provide support with helping them to be able to address issues and concerns as they arise and give them an objective voice, if you will, to talk to and talk through. We can help them to reach out to, and I keep going back to the voiceless, knowing those key areas of the community that they need to make sure that they bring into the fold, if you will, if they're not already there. And we can help them with other parts of the program as it relates to equity and issues around equity versus equality. I mean, there's a whole conversation that can be had around that. The two are not the same, to make sure that we help them with that. So all various levels of support, depending on what the superintendent needs, the board desires. We even, for example, with some new superintendents, the board might say, well, we want them to have a mentoring or a coaching contract along with their current contract. It just depends. It depends on what the 12 of you feel or is very important. and what are those areas that you want that person to focus on. So it's,
Gloria, I might add is that part of our open-ended questions we have in the survey, that one of the reasons we partner with K-12 is that they have expertise in the area of communication and customer service. And so we'll ask a number of questions on our survey that will provide additional information that we will put together and summarize, and we will provide that information to the new superintendent so he or she can have that part of their entry plan. And so it's just not the characteristics, 28 characteristics, traits you'd like to see. It's some of those open-ended questions that we have regarding the school district and how people feel about their school districts and issues that may arise. So we provide that information not only to the board gets it as well, but we provide that information on customer service to the new superintendent. So that superintendent can actually put it in their entry plan so it means something. A lot of superintendents might have a listening tour, but this information will help them regarding the information that they get on the front end. So I think this will be extremely helpful for the new superintendent board to be successful on day one.
Thank you. You kind of talked about this a little bit. We do have a little bit of a tale of two Fairfax. We have a robust community who are not going to have any issues engaging in this process. And we have another part of our community that will have to do significant pulling in for them to engage. How many people are we deploying to the community engagement process?
right now, we have 5 associates assigned. For example, this week, we're utilizing myself and 2 others for the staff component, but we have a total of 5 that we have in place that we will utilize for the parent community component, depending on how much time we need and how many we need. If we need more than 5, we can accommodate that as well. But one of the things that's unique, again, about our firm is all 3 days, you will have 3 people meeting with groups all day long, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So at 10 o'clock, I will be meeting with someone, another associate will be meeting with another group, and another associate will be meeting at another group at the same time. So it's the advantage of having more people available allows us to engage more individuals and groups.
Okay,
yeah, we got over 250 groups and individuals, much more than the reach out that has been in the past, because that's important to us and we know it's important to you.
And I would add, I know for myself, I will be here because one of the things we also know is that some groups, depending on where you hold the session, you need to have these schedules sometimes somewhere where people have easy access to come. It's important, given the size of the community, that we take a look at that. I feel that sometimes going back to the voiceless group, it's where the meeting is held, believe it or not. You know, is it at the local community center or church, or is it over at the school district office? I'm not coming to the school district office. I want to go over here. And so having someone that can come to them and give them the sense that you're engaging them in their area is very important.
Thank you. Just a couple of more. I just really wanted to reiterate that we develop a process for the community engagement as part of the interview piece, as well as how we are going to prioritize the community input, because again, I cannot reiterate this enough. I want for our employees, our parents, and our students' voices to be the ones that drive this process, and the others are going to be considered, of course, but I want that to have priority. And just a last quick thing, on slides 5 to 9, oops, time's up. Okay, I will stop there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Anderson. Next, we have Ms. Amesh.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Davis and Mr. Ray, for your collaboration and partnership in this work. I think I'd be remiss not to say that this is an exciting project as we walk out of this pandemic that hopefully will unify the community as we begin to come together to share our thoughts and select our leader. So I'm glad that you guys are joining us to do that. I also, I know that part of your strengths is actually community outreach. I think that's very obvious just from you sharing, the prioritization of the voices that we don't hear from, meeting people where they're at. I had, 2 points on language and location that you already addressed and preempted. So I appreciate that. I did want to build off of one of the things Dr. Anderson mentioned, perhaps sorry, this is kind of loud, perhaps in painting that picture of what the county looks like, so that when you do end up meeting with groups or identifying and prioritizing who's met with, that it reflects that, right? So in a county that's nearly, a third lower income, a third English language learners, 15% kids with disabilities, right? And a school system where I'll just elevate 27% Hispanic, right? Just thinking about what that map looks like. And I say this for 2 reasons. One, in how we prioritize outreach, right? So that's for you guys to think about. And then 2, how we advertise the county and its needs and its assets to candidates, so that we're making sure we're looking for folks who have the skill sets, to address all of those needs. So I just want to make sure that that's something we're constantly thinking about and familiarizing ourselves with. I know y'all are newer to our county and helping us out. And I wanted to suggest, I really am glad to see the collaboration going on with OCCR, with Ms. Lloyd. Perhaps also when you meet with leadership, to have conversations with some of the equity staff or folks who specifically focus on that, to see maybe how we can engage with liaisons, parent and community, or now we call them family liaisons, that, have that ear to the ground and really are in touch with those families who otherwise would not have an access point to our school community, as a potential source of outreach or even best practices that they've utilized to reach our families and meet them where they're at. I did want to ask, since you did mention kind of meeting people where they're at, are all of the listening sessions going to be on Zoom?
Only the ones, all except the ones that will be in person. And again, that's where we'll get input from the board as to which ones should be in Zoom and which ones should be in person. And I say that because, going back to what you just reiterated, some groups will do better engaging with somebody in person, and some groups
Absolutely.
won't. And so you know better who those you as a board know better who those groups are. And so that's where we will need input from you. But absolutely, and again, I just know from my superintendent experience, there are times when you have to just go to the neighborhood. That's what you have to do to make people feel heard. And you can tell I'm real passionate about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think our staff will have some great ideas for you. As you discuss, what they want to see in a superintendent, you could also think of, what ways they'd encourage you to continue here, finding it.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other piece I wanted to ask about was what process you are all thinking about utilizing to synthesize the feedback. So I can imagine we're going out there, wide net. But how are you all planning to do that?
What we do after we complete all of the stakeholder meetings, what we look at is common themes, common threads, common things that we've heard from multiple groups, because that says this is important. We heard it from a staff group, we heard it from a student group, we heard it from a parent group. So that's what we look at first, those common themes and those common threads, and that's what we share. And then second to that, we look at things that are just what we call red flags or red herrings. Sometimes people say things and you go, what? And so we make sure that we make the board aware of what those are. So it just really depends on what's said, but most of the time, you'll hear common themes and common threads throughout all of the groups. They might say it a little different, but the meaning will be the same. And those are the primary things that we will summarize. Naturally, we can't give every word for word of what is said, but that summary, that's how we will synthesize and bring that to you. And again, I mentioned the comments that people write on the surveys, you will get all of those. It'd be about this thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and hopefully when we develop those common themes, we don't lose maybe the minority voices or the underrepresented voices, right, who may not be as many in number. My final thing, I know I'm at time,
Your time,
is just in terms of student voice, to make sure we're looking beyond just organized student government groups that are always the ones we solicit feedback from, but a broader net. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ms. Omesh. Ms. Davis, any further comments to Ms. Omesh? Otherwise, I'll go on to Ms. Laura Jane Cohen.
Okay, no, I think I responded. Thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Cohen?
Yes, definitely wide net with student groups, Abrar, that was on my list too. The town halls that you mentioned in this slide, the 5 regions, I just want to make sure that we really have time to advertise them in our newsletters, call our PTAs, PTOs, our principals, just so we really get robust. And so many of us cover different regions. I know somebody who, Elaine, you have 3 or 4? Doesn't some 3. So a bunch of us traverse over different regions, and I know we'll want to be at all of those to get pockets of all of our communities. So I know I'm afraid when I look at Bev and Laura, that's going to be nightmare scheduling scenario. So as soon as we can get that out there, I think the community will really appreciate a lot of notice. The community panel for final candidates, I just want to touch home again. I know several of my colleagues have. Do you have thoughts already of is that something you've normally done before or no?
We have, we've done it in many different ways, depending again on the conversation with the board. One of the things I would just add here in this public meeting, we do emphasize though with those panels, the final decision of who to hire rests with the board. So we want to make sure that as we bring community involved, that they understand that they're giving input and they're giving thoughts and ideas, but the final decision rests with the board. And I would say to the 12 of you, we have to make sure that as we formulate that panel, that we truly emphasize that, because sometimes, let's just say, people get confused on that thought.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Gloria, I might also add that when we have worked with the panels, and it's not that often, but when we have, it's when we get down to the last couple, candidates, that the board and that folks get involved in that part of the process. Of course, nobody really cares about all the others. They're only interested in the top ones that might get the job. But that's when we've really kind of worked with the panel, because one of the things that we're not really addressing here, but it's a concern from a candidate standpoint, is the area of confidentiality, because all these top people that we're going to be trying to recruit, the first question they ask, what about the confidentiality part of the process, and when's my name going to get exposed? And I know I have a great job right now. Why do I want to cause unrest in my community and possibly jeopardize my own employment? So that's something we need to keep in mind and have some discussion as if we're moving into that panel part of it.
Yeah, I think our staff and our parents are very used to that. They all participate in the principal panel and do the same thing. They all sign non-disclosure agreements, and I've not heard whispers in the community before the names are actually announced. I think our community is used to that level of privacy. The last thing, just in piggybacking on what Ms. Omesh said about student groups casting a wide net, I just want to make sure that our staff stakeholders, that we have actual teachers and SBITs and people who are on the ground in schools giving you feedback, not just groups, not just representatives from those, that we make sure when we're doing staff panels that it is gatehouse folks, but it's also folks who are in each of our schools and in our pyramids. And, of course, I think especially we have certain categories of teachers who really, really have very different needs from others. And, I just want to make sure that their voices are heard, especially as we go through the different conversations we've had about how we change literacy, how we change SPED. The teachers who are involved in implementing all of that, I just want to make sure that their voices are heard.
And as the person that's meeting with those groups, I can tell you they are representing the Teacher Leader Association, the Fairfax County Leader Association, the Fairfax Education Association, the Business Education Leader Association, the Support Staff Professional Development Association, the library, the psychologist, the social worker, the speech and language.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, that's my only concern, is I just want to make sure that an association leader is not the same thing, right? If I'm head of a teacher's organization, then I'm supposed to be talking about teachers generally, whereas, and I'm not in the classroom right now. And so I just want to make sure that we're talking to, you know, boots on the ground employees who are actually in our buildings. And if we need to be a part of that, going to speak at staff meetings and collecting information to come back, like however we need to be involved in the process, I just want to make sure that we're hearing not just a small subset of teachers or people who represent teachers. And the same with principals, just like we're doing with principals. If we were just hearing from the Principals Association, that would make me concerned because that is a small subset, very important subset, but small subset. So how do we just make sure we're getting all voices of our employees?
Okay, thank you for that. And we took the list that was provided to us, and we can certainly add as we move forward, even in January, if we're, you know, missing some areas. I mean, we still have time to do that. I would also add, I go back to the town halls too. Remember, the town halls are also for everyone. It's open to any who want to attend and participate for the very reason you just mentioned.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Next, we have Ms. Tolan, followed by Mr. Frisch.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today to discuss this important topic with us. I appreciate a number of the comments of my colleagues. I really appreciated Karen Keith-Gamara calling the scheduled target dates, because especially as the conversation has transpired here today, you know, as we're talking about, you know, really making some decisions as to what meetings need to be in person versus Zoom meetings, and, you know, getting down to the nitty-gritty of some of our employees. I would suspect that we might need to add a day here or there, or move things out by a day or something like that. And so, you know, I hope that, you know, people will understand that, you know, bit of flexibility that we may need. I also appreciated the comments on the community selection panel and the languages, and appreciate the work that we'll need to do to keep that moving forward. A couple of questions that I had. I wondered if you had particular recommendations for the stakeholder meetings that you have set up. Which of those do you think it's important for board members to attend?
Honestly, none.
Okay, that's my question.
Because remember, what we want these to be is honest, open conversation. And so we want people to feel free to share whatever they feel appropriate to share without a board member sitting in the room. So I have to be honest, none.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk a little bit, especially for the public, about using K-12 insights? I have a feeling that some of the analysis that you're talking about around the large amount of data that we'll be collecting both verbally and through the survey process, is K-12 helping you with that analysis, and how does that work? And how does that facilitate things like the very quick turnaround, you know, that Ms. McLaughlin pointed out toward the end of January?
Okay, first of all, K-12 has, they have experience working with Fairfax County with previous survey information and development, but they also have experience working with large school districts, again, across the country. They have a really robust research team who is able, and naturally we check with them on this timeline even before finalizing it, and they have assured us that they have capable staff that can provide the results needed in the time frame that we've indicated, because they've done it before. And so they have the experience of putting together the data as it comes in, and when I say as it comes in, it's an ongoing process. So as surveys are being completed and then the data is being rolled into whatever needs to be presented at the end. So it's not something that they have to do all of it at once. It's an ongoing process. But they have a very capable team and just years of experience doing what is needed. And in talking to the president of the company, he's assured us that the time frame is not a problem at all.
So they'll be doing the bulk of that analysis between this January 13th date, where it's a survey deadline date, and then the 20th meeting?
Yes, in terms of the results, yes. The
Okay.
results, and the survey goes out this week, and then it ends right after we finish with the community and parent engagement stakeholder meetings, and that's on the 14th. And so between the 14th and the time that we meet with you on the 20th, they'll then be developing the results that we will then share with you on the 20th of January.
Okay, thank you. And I would also, it would be great to see that survey, I think, before it goes out this week. So I would like to second that. And,
Make sure that we get, because we have it, yeah.
yeah.
Ms. Tolan, it was just emailed.
Oh, thank you.
was just
Perfect, perfect, perfect. And again, just to say, you know, the stakeholder input and this, you know, very careful analysis of the input that we get is so important to us. So, you know, if it takes an extra day or two here or there, you know, we can appreciate that.
We can definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Are you yielding back your 28 seconds? Thank you, Ms. Tolan. Mr. Frisch, followed by Ms. Marin.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Davis and Mr. Ray, for joining us. Yeah, it was news to me, too, that Peck was apparently picking the next superintendent, so I'm glad that was cleared up. And that we actually have a very robust process for doing that. It has nothing to do with Public Engagement Committee, but it does rely heavily on public engagement, which is the first thing I want to talk about. Can we go to slide 9?
Okay, 9, Laura Arbin.
All right, I'm going to keep talking since my timer's going. There was some talk about prioritizing the feedback and how that would be done. I think it's, in my opinion, probably of equal importance about how we weight the feedback and its analysis. So all of these things are going to be important to know, and if we are, and I do want an aggregate feeling of what the entire community is feeling, but we're going to probably want, at least I will, some breakdowns by subcategory that gives me analysis based on what different pockets of the community are thinking. That will help me weigh what I'm seeing. I appreciate Ms. Omesha's comment about family liaisons, and one thing that it raised for me as we thought through all the other groups was how do we get from people, and this is something I'm interested to hear from you all on, how do we get from people their expertise-focused feedback versus their personal-focused feedback, and how do we differentiate those two kinds of feedback that we want from these different categories of people?
I'm smiling because first and foremost, you know, everyone's an expert. But in saying that, it comes from, first of all, as you ask the question and then you ask follow-up questions. I mean, all of us as associates are very skilled in understanding and hearing the answers that we get back that come from, well, this is my area of expertise, so I'm going to share with you what I think it should be, even if it's a concern or whatever the case may be, versus then just following up with, well, tell me why you think that challenge is important. And I'm thinking about the question that we'll ask, you know, what do you see as the 3 major challenges of the school district moving forward? I don't want to necessarily hear as much about their job and their child or whatever. And let me just say, we make sure that we stick with answers to the questions and not get into personalities, not get into concerns about a particular issue as much as more important, using the example of the challenges, what do you see as a challenge and why do you feel that way? So it's not only their initial response, but then asking follow-up questions to that response to make sure we clearly understand what they're trying to say, or to get them to even understand sometimes what they're trying to bring forth. So it's just having the experience of knowing how to get to what is critically important for you as a board to know.
Okay. Switching gears here to the question of transition supports for a superintendent and the types of things that can be offered. In my opinion, I think probably the most important thing that could be of help to a new superintendent in our division is assisting them with integrating with the new, or with their new leadership team and with the board so that they can hit the ground running in their job.
Very true.
Questions about equity and other things I think are extremely important, but they're going to be encountering that from day one as they take on the work with their team. So if we can put any kind of push on anything, that's where I think we should push. Along the lines of what Ms. McLaughlin shared, I think it is a monumental choice that we're making, and we should just assume that we're going to have a second interview. So in terms of planning, I think count me as one that probably will want a second interview, just to make sure, even if we have the runaway candidate, I want to be darn sure that we're making the right choice. And I would not feel right making it if we didn't bring them back in one last time. Also, on the community selection panel that Ms. Corbett Sanders brought up, agreed as well. I think most of us are probably on that page as well. And also agree with Ms. Cohen's comment about making sure that within these different groups of people that we're identifying, people are speaking in their own role as an educator or whatever category they're speaking for, not just as a representative of a group of any kind. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Frisch. Ms. Davis, do you want to respond, or otherwise I'll move on to Ms. Marin?
No, I think in terms of the breakdown by categories, from the summaries that we will provide, we can definitely do that and make sure that you have a full breadth of understanding of where the responses are coming from, because I know that helps you in terms of your thoughts and better understanding of what has been said. And we definitely take notes while we are talking to the stakeholder group, so we have that as, let's just say, background or evidence to refer to and be able to show the notes that we took down during those various groups.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Marin, followed by Ms. Derenak-Kofax.
Thank you. Thanks for all this information.
Okay.
So I do want to also just chime in that I am concerned about the time that our community and staff get to give input, so I'm glad to hear that that will be expanded. It's still pretty tight to me, but I also did send along additional suggestions for our staff, so thank you for looking into those. And I think we have to be really clear about the process for any time we're going to distribute any information publicly, to make sure it reflects, the vision that we're seeking. So especially for the survey, just to get clear though in the future going forward, who is, what's the process going to be? Who's the point person? Is it our Executive Director of Communications, Helen Lloyd, even for this week's survey? Can we just get really clear about that, please, just for this initial survey and then going further?
If you mean who is the point person for us to work with to get the survey out?
No, I'm saying to finalize the content. So who from your end is going to liaise with someone on our end and on our board is going to finalize the language, working with OCCR and making sure that it reflects, the board, just real clear, because it can't go out until the board has seen it.
Okay, well,
So I
right
think it
now,
might be more of a question for Ms.
I was going to say
Lloyd.
that's probably for the board to decide, whoever you choose for us to work with. I mean, right now, we have been working with the staff in the communication department as well as the board clerks and then the board committee. That's who when we send information, we make sure that's who we send it to. So it's whatever the group of you desire.
Okay, so Ms. Lloyd, can you speak to that?
Yes,
please?
so
Thank
we
you.
provided extensive input to the survey that was provided to us, and also the letters that were drafted too. When we get the content, we definitely review. We make sure it is ADA compliant. We make sure it fits our language, and we make sure it reads right. We've adjusted that and sent the survey language back. I believe that probably now needs to go to the chair to be shared with the rest of the board. But yes, we have. We're going to make sure that going forward, we get the content so that we do get to review it, because I do understand there was something that went out this week that we didn't get a chance to review.
And who is pressing send? Is that on our end or is it on the contractor's end?
It's on our end.
Okay.
So we are using our database, and we're using the database we've already built and got. We will add the community partners and the community that we don't have yet in our database to send out when we send that survey. So
Okay.
yes, we will
Okay,
make sure that
so-
we're sending out on our end.
So Chair Pekarsky, just if we could loop back later, please, I'd love that clarification further. Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. The other thing I wanted to mention is just in preparing for tomorrow's work session on our boundary policy discussion, the contractors had given, I thought, a good example of how to compile the pages and pages of input. So I'm happy to share that link with you just to, because it's fresh in my mind. And so, although maybe wait till tomorrow to see what everyone else thinks. But I thought it was a good compilation, a way to gather, thousands and thousands of pieces of input, which I know you've done before, but just, again, fresh in my mind. I think, too, my biggest thing with the community piece is getting the student, the family, and the taxpayer input. It's nice that we have some leadership groups, but the student voice and the parent and family voice has got to be our biggest demographic that we capture on this survey, because they are the main recipients of the public school services, and then in addition with the taxpayers who make that investment. And then finally, I'm just wondering, Ms. Lloyd, if you could speak to, do we have or are we going to have a one-stop shop website for all things superintendent search? This way when people get a question, they can go there and there's some nice general email address perhaps they can email?
Yeah, so there is definitely a place on the website that we've started to build out already since July. So we've been adding to it all the engagement opportunities, all the dates, the link to the fact the date the survey goes out, and the fact you should be looking out for it. All of that content, this work session, all the presentations, all of that content will be up there. So it'll switch in and out between the homepage as we get key moments that are really important. Like obviously this week is really a really important week with the survey going out, so that people can access it from the homepage. Maybe as that engagement sort of switches out towards the end of January, it might start to take a back seat a little bit. And then as we start to get some decision points, then that'll come back up to the front again.
Okay, well, thank you for keeping us posted on it. I'm sure you have sent it, but I appreciate continuous updates. Like, remember, this is where the stuff is, and please share it, because we want to blast that out as much as possible.
Yes,
So,
and just to add to that as well, we'll be sharing whenever there's any kind of update at all that is going into our employee news and also into FCPS this week in a regular slot.
Okay, great. And just especially, again, the opportunity for people to comment and be involved with the process. That is, for me, most key at this point, especially. Okay, thank you.
And I would add, as I have developed the letters and of the communication, the written communication, and then sent it to, again, the board clerk, which then I know has shared it with the committee and others as appropriate, as well as any others. I know that there was one communication that we put with the invitation that went out, that we had a little question about one of the words that was on there. But other than that, everything that I know I've written and have developed, including all the groups and the schedules for all of the associates, which then, as I said, I share with the clerk as well as with the communication staff.
Thank you. Ms. Marin, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Kovacs?
Thank you, and thank you so much. I'm just going to drill down a little further on some things my colleagues have already talked about. So I'm just looking at the survey now, and I was hoping maybe you can explain to me why you've decided to do this. Sorry, I'm just trying to get into it. The categories you have here for respondents, you just have staff member. Could we further disaggregate that into maybe a minimum, like teachers, administrators, and other employees? I think that's important for us to understand that rather than just staff. Because this speaks to my colleagues' desire to make sure the net is wide and we, have a representation from many different parts of the community and including their and staff. And then also, if I would like a question, again, this talks about the net. And I'm not certain, maybe Helen, you can help us with this one. I would like to know what region they live in. And I don't know if that's magisterial district. I don't know what the best way to ask that, if we have a link to a map, if they don't know. But I think that's extremely important, that the magisterial district, or we could do it by high school if it's a parent, but magisterial district encompasses the other stakeholders in this survey, community, and so we could do it both ways. I'd like somebody to comment on that, their thoughts.
So this is one I think that GR would probably need to work with K-12 Insight on to develop. This would not be potentially for us to ask. It might be their ask. I mean, I'm sure it's doable. You can definitely do it.
It's doable, but that means it wouldn't go out tomorrow.
I see a lot of head nods around the table. I think that's extremely important to know who's answering. I mean.
So to disaggregate in the staff member category, to make sure we know what position they hold.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and we could talk about what that breakdown could be. My minimum was teachers, administrators, and other employees. I mean, we could go further. We could talk.
Support employee.
So, yeah. I mean, we could. Right, counselors.
Gloria, excuse me, Gloria, and I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt. Sometimes there's a delay where what I'm hearing you say and so forth, so I apologize for that. That's a question we'll have to ask K-12. I mean, we might be able to generalize it, not only generalize it so much as administrators, teachers, or so forth. I think it'd be kind of difficult for this type of survey to go, break it down any more than that. So I think it's a question for K-12, and we certainly can get in contact with them as well as the region that she mentioned to see what region they're from.
It could be as simple as if you are a parent, what school does your child attend? And then K-12 would somehow be able to, I'm assuming, figure out what region that's in. Or our staff can't, well, and I'm not going to commit our staff to any more right now. And then the other one, if you're a community member, what magisterial district do you live in?
Yeah, well, that's something that we'll certainly, has been said here a couple times that we'll have to talk to K-12 about. We'll certainly take a look at it.
And I also want, as Helen and I both have said, now it's already been advertised that the survey is going to be out on the 14th. So we'll have to change that communication as well. I just want to make the board aware of that. I mean,
it looks like there's a comfort level. I mean, do you want to take a quick vote?
We can save it to the end if that's okay, as
yes,
we're wrapping up.
Yes, that's fine. So those are two suggestions with staffing and regional representation or school representation. My second one is I respect what you're saying about the expediency in the interview process. However, I really have to say, I think, I strongly believe we'll need a second round of interviews. So I feel the timeline and that I'm saying what a couple of my colleagues have said. So I think that timeline will have to be adjusted. And what we didn't talk about is here, and I think I started thinking about this as we were talking about the community panel. And we have had great success with our community panels in the past, also with the great deal of confidentiality they have shown during this process. And we have talked about this as a board, and I'm not sure where we have landed, but in the past, when we've held the superintendent searches, we've held what we called, and I don't know if this is the right HR term, but we held a closed process with respect to respect the confidentiality of candidates and not put their current jobs in jeopardy. So that's your understanding what we're going forward to do. I mean, I think that's what the consensus of the board, but we haven't spoken about that publicly yet.
And that's my consensus from hearing from several of you and hearing from us that the candidate is going to want to know how much is public and so on. And then when it comes to the community panel, is this something that's going to be confidential?
Absolutely.
Or, shared with any and everybody? So that's good to know.
Yes, and I think, like I said, putting the process up front, the reasons why we're doing it, it is for respect for the candidates, and then the public, at least here in Fairfax, we have not had, problems with that in the past.
Great, thank you, Ms. Jarnack Koufax. It is just myself and Chair Pekarsky left, so I'll take a brief turn and then ask Chair Pekarsky to take her turn, and then she can take over the meeting from here, and we'll see if we need to continue our conversations at that point. So many of my comments and thoughts have been shared by my colleagues, so I will not repeat them, but I will say that I think it's important, what I'm kind of hearing from everybody and in some of our conversations is a need for really a community engagement plan. Right, whether it's a community engagement plan around our survey and making sure that our survey is going out to people, whether it's a community engagement plan on making sure not just the information is going out around our town halls and other stakeholder engagement, but how are we engaging the community in responding and participating? Right, and I think Ms. Lemay made some good comments, and Ms. Cohen too, but how are we engaging those communities that don't tend to already be engaged, right? So it's more than just sort of a one-way, here's the information about a town hall, but how do we engage them, go to where they are? I think Dr. Anderson brought this up to make sure we're hearing from a robust set of voices and they know to engage and what this means. And I think that's, to me, what a community engagement plan is. It's more than an information sharing plan, it's an engagement plan. So I think that's, there's two pieces. There's on this side of it, which is helping develop the superintendent profile. And then there is, if we do a community panel, as many of my colleagues have discussed, a confidential panel, sort of on the other side of what does this process look like in terms of our picking the superintendent. And then there's the post, once we have a superintendent, how do we help that person engage with the community as they're coming on board and making that transition. But for purposes of this conversation, I think the key is what's the engagement plan to getting the community engaged in this part of the process, because I think this is right now the biggest piece that involves a robust community engagement. So that would be my question. What's the engagement plan?
Well, basically, the plan is to develop the schedule based on the information that has been initially shared about what groups and individuals the board would like us to engage with. And then from that, step one, and then from there, and utilizing the list that has been developed with priorities based, again, on the feedback or the desire and interest that you, the board, have for making sure we're not missing anything, not missing any groups, we're not including anyone that you feel is important. So that's that's the first step. Second to that, then, is sending the schedule out of the various times and dates that the meetings will be held, and in that, informing those that have been invited that the purpose of these meetings is to hear their feedback, thoughts, and ideas on the characteristics and personality traits that they would like to see in the next superintendent, their thoughts and views on how the district needs to move forward in terms of the successes that have already been established, as well as the challenges that need to be addressed. And so giving them a sense of this is what the focus of the meeting will be. And then thirdly, your feedback, meaning your feedback as a stakeholder or a community group or individual, will then be summarized and shared with the Board of Education as well as the public in a public meeting, as well as written information shared with the board. So we will make sure that the engagement plan, that everyone knows that it's not only your input based on the stakeholder meetings and the information that has been shared either via Zoom or in person, but also from the survey. and to mention that that gives you another opportunity, because we want to make sure that everyone understands that just because you participate in the stakeholder meetings, we want everyone to complete the survey, including the Board of Education. Everyone complete the survey. So that plan includes your input, again, thoughts and ideas via the survey, as well as the stakeholder meetings. And then a summary of all of that information will be shared with the board at the January 20th meeting, and thus be utilized to develop that profile that then will be used to advertise the position and to seek those candidates that the board will interview, along with now what I'm hearing, a community panel, and then describing what that panel will look like. And then all of that will help to establish the context, if you will, for the interviews that will be held on March 21st and 22nd, as well as the finalists on March 28th and 29th. So everything that is in the timeline, as well as what we've discussed this afternoon, can help people understand that's the process. That's the engagement plan for all your constituents, staff and parents and community.
I appreciate that, and I understand how the timeline has places in there where the community input is solicited and compiled, including board input. I guess my question is, how do we make sure, especially given the timeline between now and when we're doing our community stakeholder focus groups in January, that we do that robust outreach, right? And that robust engagement to ensure people are responding, especially given the time frame over the winter break. So that's just one thing I want to put out there, is that, even though we're sending out a survey, even though we're sending out, emails, how do we get to the people that we need to get to make sure those voices are being heard? So I don't necessarily, you may not have an answer today, but something that is really near and dear to me and to many of my colleagues, and things that they've said, is to make sure that we know our communities have that robust engagement opportunity and know why, and we're going to where they are to sort of encourage them to come. So that's my biggest comment.
If I could add, because, and that's a very important component, it's not only sending out the initial invite, but it's also sending out 2 reminders to continually remind and ask. I've already discussed that with Laura and Beverly in terms of the board clerks, because right now, like with the staff, the RSVPs are coming to that office, and they are keeping track and letting me know, who has said yes, who has said they can't, and so on. But reminders, this is the date, we sent you the invite, that kind of thing will help to do what you've just asked.
I will yield back my 21 seconds, so thank you. Ms. Pekarsky?
Okay, excellent. I agree with most of the things that have been said. I don't want to shortchange in any way our stakeholder outreach and engagement, because we want to go quickly, which we do, but we have to strike that balance. So I want to make sure that that is a top priority, and I know you share that, but that is a priority, I think, that I've heard from this whole board. To that effect, when will the public expect to be notified of their participation in these groups?
Well, right now, our schedule includes doing that this Thursday.
Okay.
That would be the 16th.
Okay, and you still think we're going to be on schedule for this? I mean, I just ask because I know people watching, that's the question that we're all getting, is when will that happen? So
it depends based on our meetings today, what feedback you give me about the groups. We all have the same list that I have been utilizing, and then I received some additional information this morning about others to add and so on. So for me, in terms of being the one that's going to set up the schedule, I just need to know who to schedule. And I need to be able to respond to the question or the statement, rather, that has been generated by several of you. in terms of priorities, based on that list that you have in front of you as well, should we be looking at certain priorities of groups, or let's say subgroups within groups, and just to make sure that we are covering what you desire for us to cover. So I think but right now, the date is Thursday the 14th. If we need to look at moving that, that's a conversation we need to have just based on our conversation and discussion today.
Okay. And I did hear some comments about the survey. Everybody I know does want to have some input and be able to see that. So if we can take a quick consensus of the board, if people are comfortable with ensuring that we've all had an opportunity to take a look and offer our feedback before that goes out to the public, and we can notify people as needed as to when that will be. So all those in favor of
information?
Yes.
That's okay. I just want to ask when that would be, when our deadline would be if it's not tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I was going to ask the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think,
I need a
well,
date.
so that's what I'm asking.
We do, but I want to be,
To delay
in
the
talking to K-12, I want to be able to give them a date that has been determined by you, and then if they can't meet that, then I can come back and say, but I would like a date to give to K-12 to say, we need this by.
Okay. This Friday. Go ahead.
It's not that long of a survey. I would suggest that we put a priority on this and ask my colleagues to have it back ideally by tomorrow, but if that is too short of a time frame, then I would suggest by Wednesday. But we want to be able to have K-12 work on this and get it out to begin the process, hopefully before Christmas, and then and then to be able to continue to have that engagement along the schedule that's been provided.
If I could
Yeah.
just interject as well, that we do need to build in the time for the retranslation of anything that we adjust or change in that survey. So that can take 3 to 4 days, depending on the language and the other requirements that that language services have.
The
We
question
don't
is to delay
oversee
it.
that.
To delay it. Okay, I'm sorry. I meant Friday to get it back from K-12. But I guess we don't know. Until we talk to them, we don't know. Okay, so for, sure. So for us, can we agree to have all our comments in by tomorrow, close of business? Is there a consensus around that? Okay. To me and to Bev, please. And then we will work with Gloria. Okay, I think we will go ahead and do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to capture what Helen said. I think what this is not where I wish we were on the survey. I wish there'd been far more direction, that we would have been told to come today and share with all of you guys what the input was. So here's where we are, knowing the translation impact and all that. I think Tammy raised 2 really important changes. So I'm going to try and make sure I don't come at this with the perfection mindset, but we need to know where these people reside when they respond, and we do need to disaggregate our employees better. I think we do those 2 things, it shouldn't cause too much impact on the translation challenges to everything that's already been done. Like, I don't want to undo all the translation
Right.
for all the existing work. It's just if we need to add these 2 things in.
Right, right. Very good. Okay, go ahead, Melanie.
You know, I was surprised that the survey that we received is in kind of the post-OCCR review, because it didn't have those formatted things that our surveys traditionally have, including, region, elementary school, secondary, isn't there like a boilerplate of what our surveys generally have? Because what I saw, and I do have concerns about the content as well. I didn't realize that had already gone through translation, but I have a lot of concerns about the survey. Having written surveys and also conducted a lot of this kind of focus group work myself.
But I will say, this is a survey that we have utilized, developed by K-12 with districts all over the country. But I hear and appreciate what you're saying. And again, when we sent it last week, I believe it was last Monday, we then sent it to where we were sending everything else that we have developed. And
Okay, we are here. That's the path forward right now. I think it's important because I think there have been some important points raised that we do need to take care of. I will go ahead and do go backs. I can go down the list if people are interested. Karen Corbett.
So is this the period in which we're going to unpack the list of potential people being consulted, or
We can.
what is this process?
Today's the day. Yes.
Okay. So I want to echo some of the comments that my colleague, Dr. Anderson, made about proportionality in our representation. I think that's really important. I also want to ensure that all of our advisory committees are identified, and they have been, I believe, as well as the employee advisory councils. But I do want to offer that when we go out to the employee community, that we ask them, the heads of each of these organizations, to ensure that they are reaching out beyond just themselves. The parent leadership community advocacy groups, I'm a little concerned about the broad brush in which we are doing some of this. When we say booster clubs, which booster clubs, and then when we say we've got a number of different organizations, what I would urge is that we do send out a request to every PTA and PTO in the county, because those are our traditional areas, as well as the newer organizations of parent groups. The other area that I would urge is that when we say our parent leaders in the different languages, I don't know what that means. I thought that a lot of that was done through our Title I committee or other organizations, and it seems to me that we want to be really careful with that. Real Food for Kids, I believe Mary Porter is no longer the head of it, so we do want to make sure that we have the right person there. And then with the Board of Supervisors, I appreciate that. I also think that in addition to our staff and we should look at some of our senior staff that may have left recently and get their input, because I think that that's important, especially given how recently some of our staff have left. And I would, under the offices of the Fairfax County government level, I do not see the health department, and given the experiences of the past couple of years, I would urge that the health department be added to that. And then, let me see what other, let's see. I don't see Grand Involve as community-based organizations, and they are in, I think, 13 of our schools, so I would urge that Grand Involve is added to the list. And the EduTutorial also. I don't see in here a list of the Fairfax delegation to Richmond. And I would suggest that at a minimum, they are asked to provide input to the survey, given that they are our primary funders. And along those same lines, perhaps the federal delegation as well.
I would ask, as we have this conversation, that there's a place where all your suggestions are sent to, and then I receive one composite list of anything that needs to be added, because that way that will be very helpful.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. we have Megan.
So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, so there isn't any confusion here, and I'm not sure I'm clear on this. So based on the November 15th meeting that the board had with you all to kind of set the stage, and this list that we have here, in red is identified the groups that in the prior superintendent search we consulted with.
Exactly.
But is this in terms of just inviting them to participate in a survey, or this is you're going to sit down and talk with them?
This was inviting them to a meeting, a focus group meeting, a stakeholder meeting. So the ones in red, as you just indicated, were the ones that were invited last time. The others are additions to that, and they would be invited as a group. I'm just going to start, for example, at the top of the list on the first page.
No, it's okay, because I know we're short on time. I wanted that clarity. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. So my concerns are when the county executive was hired, this school board, none of us were called in for a focus group. We weren't involved in that in any way. So I would have no problem with you all, interviewing and talking with the county chairman of the board of supervisors. I think that's totally appropriate. I think inviting our county school board of supervisors to respond to a survey would be great. But you guys, this list is immensely large. In the prior conversation, I thought we all agreed there was no way we would have the time and ability to decide among the 12 of us, okay, they're going to be singled out for focus group work. They're not going to be, they'll just get invited to a survey. So I thought we envisioned that other than, key stakeholders within the Fairfax County school system family, including, parents and stuff, everything else that was community and business related would be, we really want to encourage you to participate in the survey. We want to invite, send them reminders, things like that. But the focus group part, I'm just really worried how this is being distilled down. And we can be inviting everybody to go to town halls and things. And I know Mr. Fisher signaling maybe you can help me here. So
Didn't we say, put them in buckets? We didn't want them individually focused, but
Some will be combined, but.
Well, the board of supervisors can't, because that'd be a violation of.
But I was led to believe we wanted to expand the involvement. So that's why I took this list to heart. That was shared with me. We want to expand the community and parent involvement.
I totally understand. I think what I struggle with, and with 12 of us, I know we're all different, but I do better when I see a structure and a framework. And I'm looking at my beloved partner, Melanie Marin, who's also often, this is hard for me because I'm just looking at a list. I don't know what that means to you and Mr. Ray, and maybe my colleagues, you can understand this is what's making me a little uncomfortable here is it's all about the implementation execution. And this doesn't tell me how our search firm plans to execute, which we then run the risk that if this falls into a problem, the public's going to come back to us and we're going to hold the bag of blame. So I think there needs to be a little more clarity on what Dr. Davis, you and Mr. Ray think we're signaling here. And I need it to be listed, not just a verbal sort of, we'll have focus groups, because I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how you guys have decided to actually do that in terms of how many, who are they?
So can I just jump in on that? I think that's part of this discussion because we haven't given them that direction. We've provided the stakeholder list from the prior superintendent searches and that our division uses to engage in other matters. So looking at that, I think your comments are important and a topic of discussion for the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm just mindful of the time, I think, it's 3:20 and I'm trying to figure out, this is another big piece of the work and we didn't plan for it in our timing. So I guess that's again, why I'm nervous, because I'm looking at going, were we getting ready to walk out of here? And if we're not, I think trying to tackle this part B is going to be big.
Well, that's why I mentioned right now,
we are scheduling 5 associates. I mean, we can handle this. We could meet with and send an invitation to the various the school board citizen advisory committee as an example. That could be a group. And we could either combine that with the advisory council, depending on the number. But what I'm saying to you is I took this list to mean that it had been reviewed and looked at and moving forward with the scheduling of 5. So you take 5 associates and at 10 o'clock, that's 5 groups that could be held, 5 different groups. I think what you have to keep remembering, we have more people to engage, and we're operating under the idea that you wanted to engage more people. So consequently, we took this list to heart, and basically you see the broad categories there in bold print, and my plan has already started to just then schedule them with the individuals that we have. That's why we said you have over 250 on the slide.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Davis. My 15-second of advocacy is, please put the county executive as a one-on-one interview. He works extremely close with the superintendent, and I think he will have a lot of helpful insight being the county executive over the last 6 years.
Whatever and however
I should say
you
4.5.
want it is what we will do.
Yeah, thank you. And no, I don't think you've misunderstood. We have made it very clear that we want robust stakeholder engagement. Ms. Keys-Gamarra is actually next, and I think she does have some suggestions to help move us
Right.
along a bit too.
Because thank you so much for being here and listening to us as we think out loud, actually, which is very valuable. But, you know, in terms of some of the things that I've heard today, I don't think that there was a way for you to know how to do that, and that comes from board direction. And so I'm going to suggest that I don't know whether we want to use the committee that helps, you know, do the selection of this group, or we want to have another time for input through a Google document or something to be able to give board input as quickly as possible to organize the information that we are discussing today, because quite frankly, I feel bad. I know that we have, these are important comments, but sometimes you're getting information and it's very difficult for a person in your position to be able to kind of figure out how to organize all of that. I think that's our responsibility. So we have to come up with a structure on how to do that and then give you that information. I think that's the fairest thing to do. So with respect to those groupings, I agree with Ms. McLaughlin with respect to there may be certain people you need to have one-on-one conversations with. So we need to put that in a document. Perhaps we want to use the committee. If not, I can take direction from our chair and vice chair, but certainly we need to have that. With respect to survey, I think we need to do the same thing. We need to bring these are the comments, if there's something you need from us, please put it in writing to our chair and vice chair and vice versa, so that we can make sure that we have a meeting of the minds of what those expectations are. So I just thank you, because we are a group of folks who we like to dig down and make sure, and this issue of community engagement is near and dear to our hearts. And so that's what,
I understand that.
right. So hopefully some of those organizing tools will help. And I will yield my 45 seconds to any questions or anybody else that might want to feed into how we might organize this information so we can move forward as quickly as possible.
And let me just add, community engagement is something we do extremely well. So all we need for you to tell us is who and how, why, not why, but just who, and prioritize it. And we can take it from there. That's all we need. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I did think the way we had communicated this in the past was that after everybody takes a look at this list if there are major omissions, and I would say major because it's not realistic for 12 people to sit and pick through a list. It just isn't the way to best utilize our time. Major omissions or issues can be sent to me or to, I think last time we said Helen. To me is fine, and I can forward to the appropriate people, however, and maybe at this point in time is probably the best way, I think, to go forward if people are comfortable with that. And with that, Ms. Somesh.
I'm okay. Okay. Thank you.
Very good, just going down the list. Ms. Tolan. Mr. Frisch.
Thank you. And I appreciate the request that we send major omissions to y'all. I do want to elevate that it doesn't appear any of the LGBTQ stakeholder groups are included on the list. And so I will be emailing you to include FCPS Pride, GLSEN Nova, Transgender Education Association, and I will hope that the Pride Liberation Project is involved in the student component of our outreach. So I hope they will be included. I do note that throughout this document, many of the other groups that were mentioned in previous discussions have been included. So it's good to see that those have been added. In terms of the way forward here, and I can appreciate what Ms. Keys-Gamarra is saying about making sure that we're arming everybody with the tools they need to do the work. I think what makes the most sense to me is for this board to indicate its consensus on the groups that we're identifying, and then we can expect a plan around how that outreach is going to take place. I can appreciate that GR Recruiting has many associates to deploy in that effort, but we also want to make sure that that's done the most efficient way possible so that nothing's falling through the cracks. For example, if there are 250 groups, it may mean that, for example, the equity group has a very extensive list, as does the religious organizations group has a very large list of groups. It may mean that we break those in half so that no one voice is being crowded out in a way that another group that might only have 5 groups represented would have more of an opportunity to speak to their priorities. So I think it's good and wise for us to put these into buckets like we discussed when we met previously, but we just need to make sure that those buckets are as equitable as possible to all the groups being asked to participate so that we can actually get what we're hoping to get out of them. To that end, I would also indicate that we should probably take the standing committees off of the list because we're already going to be having our one-on-one sessions with GR Recruiting about our own personal feedback, and we're the members of the committees. So it probably makes sense to remove those. Other than that, that's it for me, and I'll wait for the opportunity to provide more structured feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch.
And I can appreciate that too in terms of, and for example, Bev especially has been very good at this in terms of, I just asked, are there people that should not be in the room together?
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's my own background. I know there are people that should not be in the room together.
Because you really want the conversation to be focused on the task at hand and not at the back and forth between potential parties.
So I just share that I'm very cognizant of things like that.
Okay, we have Ms. Marin. I know you had the beginning. You okay? Okay. Ms. Dernak-Kofax. Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns that have not already been raised, addressed, comments? Go ahead, Ms. McLaughlin.
So I'm just trying to make sure again on the timeline, because again, I am still very concerned, and I think we are losing some valuable time on the front end with how long we're going with the survey, to the survey input, and then to when you envisioned posting the application to when we would bring it back to the board. And so I'd like to see if, there can be some consideration for tightening up that window from when the application deadline closes. And even then, my colleagues, based on prior experience, I think we might want to say, applications open till filled, but initial, review of applicants or something, because, I mean, we never know what could end up happening based on that. And in Fairfax County, we often will say open till filled because it's going to remain open till filled, because you could have someone all of a sudden decide after February, 1st or whatever deadline you decide is your deadline for the applications.
Are you saying not have a March 4th deadline, which appears on the timeline now?
Yes, and squeeze that up a little bit. So you indicated that on the 21st of January, you'd go ahead and post the application and the profile.
Correct.
And if you go from January 21st to March 4th, that's giving almost a 6-week window.
Yes.
I'm saying back that up about 2 weeks. More, as you've talked about, people are already aware that we're looking to.
Shorten it.
Yeah, shortening. I'm trying to shorten up that, so don't give 6 weeks to when we go to March 4th. Go a little bit earlier into late February, that you guys would start screening and preparing the applicants to us, so that you're coming to our board with that first round of presentations, not on March 17th, but maybe like March 7th. When I was doing the math, you could tighten up the application deadline, the closing deadline, and then as a result, we could have a better window in the month of March for doing that first and second round of interviews, especially since, as you heard, I think there's consensus on the board. We want to make sure we have a second round with finalists.
Is your desire with the first and second round to have more days, or just more time in between the two interviews? In other words, we could look at moving the timeline up, because we wanted it earlier in the first place, but but we did. So we were accommodating.
Well, I'm being mindful that because of when the National School Board Association conference hits.
We talked about that.
Right, and then we lose all those we can't be interviewing the very superintendents who are at the National School Board Conference too. So everything's kind of compressing us to the end of March. That's why I'm trying to back that up, because I do think 2 rounds of interviews, and maybe we're going to end up having some candidates who come from the West Coast, and even though they can come, it's still a travel time to book flights and get out from the western half of the U.S. is not easy. So I'm just saying, I don't know that we need 6 weeks of a window before you start to prepare a slate for us.
And I hear that. Again, I think that's a very serious conversation that the 12 of you have had, because we talked about this initially, and I'm going to be very honest here, and we wanted to move it up, and we're told you wanted to move it back some.
Well, to be fair, what we really wanted to make sure we did was not start serving our community right before the winter break.
Exactly.
So it hasn't, and we actually said, based on prior superintendent searches, we were able to do this in a window between January and the end of February to then do the rounds of interviewing, but you're not bringing us the slate until March 17th. It's too late.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying is go 4 weeks with the application portion. We gain back 10 days at least to then have that more robust window of the interviewing part is the most important thing we do. So, and I want to make sure we have time with you guys to get there. I can hear frustration, but honestly, Tammy and I are the only 2 who've done this twice. And so.
But I don't want you to overly worry about people getting here for the interviews. I know, but I want to put that out. And as far as the 4 weeks, we can look at that. You want to make sure, again, that, people have time to kind of think about it. But in terms of the timeline, if you want to do what you're suggesting, fine.
I'm just
Gloria, can I add this? The second interview, it was never our intention to not have a second interview. We just put it was optional. So that was never gone away. But I will tell you, in today's climate, and you and I will be speaking at at the Administrators National Conference in February, where we're going to be talking to people, and we'll probably be making some appointments, and people may fly in and visit with us. Our associates in this climate have, and I can appreciate that you've had other searches, but I've had hundreds and hundreds of searches, and I can tell you, we need a little time to recruit. And we will be, we've made that adjustment already on the, front end, and we will be talking to candidates, and we will be looking at their, investigating them and so forth. But if you want to move the timeline up, I think you're going to miss a few candidates. Now, I was okay to move it up, but we had to move a bunch of other dates around. But we're trying to maximize the very best opportunity for you to get, your candidates. So if you want to cut it down to 4 weeks, we can do that. I'm not sure that's a good move at this point in time, but that's my professional opinion.
I guess maybe I'm confused at your end of the process, because I thought people apply and then you guys start your interviewing and vetting.
Yes.
So in terms of the
we're interviewing them and vetting them throughout the process. I mean, when they send one application in or they send a letter, we start looking at them as soon as we get the first communication.
But Mr. Ray, I thought that you can't start recruiting and identifying candidates until we've developed a profile, which would be not before January 20th school board meeting.
Yes.
So
yeah, I understand that.
So starting January 20th, you can officially start identifying candidates. And I'm just doing the math that we might be able to at least gain 7 to 10 days that I think will be valuable on the board's end for 2 rounds of interviews. Plus, I'm trying to.
Will have that.
Yeah. So my understanding, just to clarify, I think we are going to have that. We had put that on there for 2 rounds.
Optional will come off.
Yeah. And unless, I guess, I'm hearing as the experts, you are recommending to us that we keep those 6 weeks open. So unless there are others on the board that would really like to move on that and condense it even more, I think we've given you a lot of feedback today. As you can tell, we are a very passionate group, and we must and want to get this right. So we appreciate you working with us on that. Do you have another question, Ms. Keys-Gamarra? Go ahead.
I think, and my colleague, Mr. Fritz, mentioned part of this, I think you've gotten a lot of feedback. What I do not want to do, which is why I am not chiming into some of these comments, is there are things that you're going to see because you're in a position to see them that we're not going to know about. And I don't want to foreclose things that you may need to respond to protect our best interests. Exactly. So I would recommend that we, and this is somewhat of a summary of what you said, but I wanted to clarify, I want you to have the flexibility you need to do the best job for us. It may be that you get in there and you go, you know what, this is much shorter than we anticipated, and we can wrap this up and we can publish some different dates and move on. But if that doesn't happen, I don't want you to feel that, oh my goodness, the board said we have to fit here, but that's not in our best interest. So I would encourage that, we do this process of, communicating with Stella and our chairs as necessary so that we can communicate with you. And any recommended changes based on these comments, that you would communicate that with our board leadership. But I want to make sure we're respecting your expertise so that we can move forward and not cut off our nose to spite our face. I know that's not what the intent is, but I just want to be real respectful because, there are people who do things that I'm not good at, and I'm so glad that other people are here to do it. So, here we go.
Just a very quick comment. I so appreciate what you said. That's what I was going to say too. But the other piece of it is, our communications staff has already said we've got that website. So for the public listening, changes to the timeline, changes to things will be posted as soon as we know them. But we need this flexibility. This is a huge recruiting process. It doesn't go always, hour by hour the way you might expect it. So appreciate everything that you said, and we will keep the public apprised.
So Stella, if you could summarize what you have heard and what we need to do moving forward so that we're clear, that would be helpful for me.
Absolutely, and I appreciate Ms. Tolan and Ms. Keys-Gamara with your feedback, and I know we have, we're keeping close communication. So the most important thing is that we will be transparent with any changes or anything that necessitates us being flexible in order to recruit the best candidate during a time where we are still in a worldwide pandemic. I just want to put that out there. So, this may not be the same process as in a quote unquote average normal year. So I think where we are right now is we are going to be awaiting board feedback on the survey if there are any glaring omissions. I know we had a couple comments that will be due by tomorrow at 5 to myself and Bev. And we, will communicate with you two, of course. And then you will talk to K-12 to see how soon we could kind of turn that around and put that out. We will be awaiting some details around the engagement plan and how we will be communicating with our stakeholder groups that will be meeting with you. In the meantime, we will be awaiting comments from board members if they have any additions to that stakeholder list that has been provided, or any changes that they feel must happen. And of course,
When is the board going to send that to you?
I would like that to be by tomorrow at 5 if everything can happen. We have had access to this for a while now, so I think that is a fair deadline. And am I forgetting anything, Vice Chair? What else do you have?
No, really, those are the two main points, the survey comments and the stakeholder feedback comments, and then the flexibility on the timeline.
Yep.
And just to
So
make sure.
we will not post the timeline until we finish getting the feedback, correct?
I think we can post it. I mean, I think the dates are, pretty on target. I would say, and maybe this is Ms. Lloyd's shop, we just maybe want to make sure that we make it very clear on the website that this is a flexible process subject to change, but this is a goal and a framework that we are working. Yeah, estimated, yes, that we're working very hard to meet.
And then what I will do, based on the feedback that you will receive tomorrow, then we will get to, and like I said, I'll be here, and then we'll look at a different date to roll the invitations out to the parent communities. That's something that I want to make sure that we can get out before the holiday.
Yeah, agreed, absolutely. I think that's key right now for us to get that notification out. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, just process-wise, I so appreciate, as chair and vice chair, you guys do a Herculean job leading our board, and I'm so grateful. And this is kind of new, obviously, for us to do something at this scale. I would just say that I think it's going to be so imperative that anything like even survey input, like we have to have really clarity around that, because in talking to a number of board members, we didn't know that the draft survey was there, that you guys needed our input from it. And so, I want to be helpful to everybody in the process. So I'm just thinking going forward.
So
we need to have like a clear checklist, and our staff aides, I think, need to play a really big role in this too, between the clerk of the board being the point of contact, going out in this way, because you made the comment earlier, we've all had it for a while, and like that.
The
kind of paints-
stakeholder list, today's the first time I saw the survey, so that was a stakeholder list.
Oh,
It's in the portal, so everything is.
so you want the
uploaded.
stakeholder input, but again.
And the survey
yeah.
input by tomorrow at 5.
thank
And
you.
again, going back to the fact, we are pushing this, so we are, having to work just quickly to get this kind of turned around. And with that, thank you. It's a big process, and we appreciate all the work and you being here, and wish you good luck in the engagement of this week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Gary. Thank you. And
Bye now. Appreciate it.
is the work session's adjourned. We will be meeting for closed session back in our, I don't need to read anything. No, I didn't certify. Got closed.